You have been muted. You have been unmuted.
That's okay. Do we have Daniel Renner on the phone?
Daniel Renner's on the phone.
Great. Keith Walker.
Here.
Rex Ruge.
Here.
Doug McKee.
Here.
Richard Hamilton.
Here.
And our chairman, Mehdi Arzami, is not present today.
So, Board, if I may, just to bring you up to speed, we don't have the chairman here, and our vice chair has resigned his position, so we're without a chair and a vice chair. According to the bylaws, Article 2, Section 1B says, in the event that both the chair and the vice chair shall be absent, then the members of the present shall choose one from among their number to be chair pro tem for that meeting. So it asks that the board select someone to be chair pro tem for this meeting.
I make a motion to vote Keith Walker in for the pro tem chair.
I'll second that. Dan Renner.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. You bet. Please stand and take your hats off and start the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
and justice for all.
justice for all.
I'll make that motion for approval for October 10th, 18 minutes.
All right. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? For the approval of the minutes from October 10th, 2018?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That passes. Okay, call to the public. Anybody? Call to the public. All right, we're going to go into new business. Staff, you guys got that?
So you want to introduce them and then just say, so introduce this and then.
Pro-Chair, Mr. Walker, and members. Item number 1 would be the application for review, a request for review of a code interpretation for residential aircraft hangars, International Building Code Section 412.5. I have put in your packet a section out of the Code Advisory Board handout, which is code interpretation and review procedures. Since we haven't had one of these in quite a while, and this isn't, part of the regular meeting, I was going to have Mr. Taylor, our attorney, kind of go over the details of the review.
You have basically a synopsis of the procedure that we have here today. We're basically a quasi-judicial body that will be deciding on the position of the building code officer versus the applicant. The person that has filed the appeal, he'll be able to be first. The building official will present his position. The person providing the appeal will also present their decision or position, and then you'll make a decision based on the evidence presented here. To keep in mind that you cannot waive a requirement. What you're in the building code, what you are doing is interpreting whether or not the building code states what either the applicant or the building official states, but you cannot waive a requirement. That's not the province here. You're basically an interpretive body at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. The case before you today is an applicant has submitted plans for a residential structure with an attached 2,500 square foot residential aircraft hangar. The property is located at 5144 Antelope Drive in the Sun Valley Air Park in Fort Mojave, Arizona. I, the chief building official, have determined that the proposed aircraft hangar of 2,500 square feet in size and is above the 2,000 square foot maximum for residential hangars, and therefore is required to meet the requirements of regular aircraft hangars as outlined in section 412.4 of the 2012 International Building Code. The applicant is appealing this determination to the Building Code Advisory Board. So in your packet, I've put together findings, code provisions, and conclusions. Code provisions are that in the International Building Code, Chapter 4.
Excuse me, Gilbert, they're saying they can't hear you in back. Is there any way we can?
I can go closer.
At this point, though, it'll be their turn to provide their case and then you follow up.
Okay.
So just following the order of proceedings, basically, as it states on the second page, the chief building official summarizes the issue which he's done. At this point, then we'll turn it over to the appellant to present their case and their appeal, and at which point the chief building official will present his full case. The appellant then can be heard for a rebuttal, and then any questions that the board would have.
Okay.
So at this time, we'd turn it over.
At this point, Larry, if you'd like to come up and state your case. If you would, go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Okay. Larry D. Adams, 2007 Highway 95, Bullhead City. Mr. Chairman, board members, staff members, thank you for the opportunity to have a hearing here today. I'm accompanied by my clients, Jody and Craig Narr, in the back. If we need them, they'll be available. I want to start with a series of questions. I apologize, I couldn't hear a thing that went on before I came up here. So if I missed something, I'm sorry. I'm old, I'm deaf, and the masks don't help. But really, I'd like to start with a series of questions. And I don't know who would appropriately answer them, perhaps Gilbert or Tim. But the first question would be, is there any definition in the residential code for an RV garage?
Mr. Adams, I believe there is not. There is a definition of accessory structures that are incidental to residential uses.
But nothing that specifically says RV garage, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, are there any requirements then for an RV garage that are different than any standard garage in the residential code?
Again, Mr. Adams, there is a definition of accessory structures with limitations based on the incidental use of residential structures.
Okay, but not as far as a RV garage specifically.
Our RV garages or recreational garages are not addressed in the code.
Thank you. Are there any definitions in the residential code for a recreational vehicle?
I'll have to look that one up. There's not.
Thank you. Are there any size restrictions in the residential code on an RV garage?
Similar to the case before us, there is in the special uses in the IBC, there is a restriction of 3,000 square feet for residential garages. It is also in the IRC under definitions, and I can read that too. Basically, definitions of the 2012 IRC accessory structures is a structure not greater than 3,000 square feet in floor area and not over 2 stories in height, the use of which is customary accessory and incidental to that of the dwelling and which is located on the same lot.
Okay, by that interpretation, you're saying that you can't have over 2,000 square feet of garage, period?
The definition restricts accessory structures incidental to residential to 3,000 square feet in size.
Okay, separate structures.
It does not differentiate between attached or detached.
What was the word separate? What was that in reference to?
Incidental or accessory to the dwelling. There is no separate.
Okay, and that's found where, please, sir?
In IRC section 202 definitions under accessory structure.
Thank you. In this case, with our clients, although it's an airplane, it is a recreational vehicle. There's nothing that says that an airplane can't be a resident or a recreational vehicle. In this case, this is what it is. It has no commercial application whatsoever. It's a recreational vehicle. In this garage, our clients intend to have other recreational vehicles, i.e. boats, side-by-sides, ATVs, jet skis. But the airplane is just merely another recreational vehicle that's not prohibited under the code. So kind of the question that comes to my mind, if we'd have titled this structure an RV garage rather than a hangar, it would appear to me that we wouldn't have a problem. because it is a recreational vehicle. And it's not prohibited, as near as I can tell, anywhere in the code. Fact is, it's not addressed anywhere in the residential code. So the interpretation is, now it automatically falls in the commercial code. And if you read the commercial code, and I provided a packet of information for this hearing. Did the board members get it? You got
I believe it's in our book,
whole
yeah.
packet.
Yeah.
So the question comes down to, in the building code, which it appears to me it's a reach to apply the building code to this recreational or residential dwelling. It's a reach to apply it, period. In the building code, it says you can have a structure up to 2,000 square feet and have no special requirements on 1 hour fire separation. And we sure don't have a problem with that. The same thing that you'd have in the residential code. But because it just says arbitrarily in the building code 2,000 square feet, then all of a sudden our client's expected to comply with the most stringent commercial requirements of a 2-hour firewall if you're 30 feet from the property line or 30 feet from a public right-of-way. Well, you can't get a bifold door with a 2-hour fire rating that I know of anywhere. So I don't know how you'd comply with that. When I asked about that provision, said, well, maybe it's to the center of the street. No, it says to the public right-of-way, which is a property line. So it's virtually impossible to comply with that. But what our clients are being asked to do is comply with the most stringent commercial code where you do aircraft maintenance, paint aircraft, and that's totally inappropriate in this application, in my estimation. I don't think it should have ever been referred to the building code. It should have stayed with the residential code. And there's nothing in the residential code to prohibit this application. A minor technicality, if you read the building code, it says that that limitation will be 2,000 square feet and 20 feet high. That's 40,000 cubic feet. Well, a RV garage is 25 by 25, or 2,500 square feet, and 16 feet high, which this one is 40,000 square feet. But I guess our case comes down to, don't believe that it should have been automatically kicked into the building code and out of the residential code, and it sure shouldn't be a requirement to comply with the most stringent commercial standards in the building code. This is a recreational vehicle attached to a single-family residence for that purpose, and it's inappropriate to try to bring in the building code in this application. I think that's an arbitrary number. No sound reason for having it that I can think of. But if you go through the residential code, it's totally silent, and that's what this structure is being built under. So that in a nutshell, I will ask Craig and Jody Narr, who are the clients that are here, if you've got anything you'd like to add to what I've said. Okay, that's kind of the sum total of what we're presenting here. I'll be happy to entertain any questions anybody might have.
Anybody have questions for Larry?
I have questions, but I don't know if they're actually directed to Mr. Adams or not.
Okay.
It would be to the building department as well.
Fire away.
So, I wrote them down, so I'm trying to read my handwriting and ask this at the same time. When you applied for the building permit, was any of this addressed at the building permit, or was it built without a building permit? Where are we at with that? I guess that's my biggest question. That's where we need to start.
If I can answer that question, Chair and member. A building permit application was submitted in, and during the plan review process, it was observed that these rules and regulations would apply to it. So the building permit has not been issued and is pending review based on the standards of the aircraft hangar.
This building's been built, though, right? No. Okay.
No.
Okay. Now I'm in that with you. I was understood a month ago that this was already built.
No, sir.
Rex, do you have any?
Well, building department wise, is there really?
Push your button on there.
Sorry.
Gilbert, Tim, do you see any reason, just off the top of the cuff, I would tend to agree with Larry. I don't see that this is different than a giant RV bus in a garage. Do you see a significant hazard beyond an RV being parked in this garage that an aircraft represents? Because otherwise, it does seem to me like we're getting hung up on the technicality of its aircraft hangar.
Chairman Walker, Board Member Ruge, if I may, I think it might help if the chief building official can go through and lay out the reasons for his interpretation, and then allow the applicant to rebut any of those, and then if we can get to questions at that point. I think that might help clarify it a little
So
bit.
if we want to go back to just questions to Larry, then we'll let Gilbert.
If that would
Any
work.
questions for Larry? Okay. Larry, I do have a couple questions. Are they planning on fuel storage or just the fuel that's in the plane?
Just fuel in the plane, no secondary fuel storage at all.
No maintenance going on in this building?
No. And I think, if I could, Mr. Chairman, a couple of things. Deed restrictions in that subdivision prohibit any commercial use whatsoever in the vehicles in there. And then the big question, it would appear at this point, and I didn't know better, if we'd have just put RV garage on the plans, we wouldn't have this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if we change the plans, called the RV garage, it looks to me like it goes away.
Yeah. What, I'm not a pilot, but this plane, what's the fuel in it? Is it just a 105 octane, or what is it? 105? Okay.
I can't answer that. I don't know anything about airplanes. I like the ground.
And along with that, what is the capacity in the aircraft itself?
I'm Craig Nahr. The fuel capacity of the airplane is 163 gallons, and it uses 100 low-lead aviation fuel, which is basically high-octane gasoline, and it's sold there at the airport.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate that. Anybody else have questions? Reason I asked that, just so for everybody knows, is some of these boats that are getting stored in there running that 105 race fuel.
Mm-hmm.
We've never had an issue with that. That's kind of what I was thinking out loud, just kind of, okay.
And just one, I assume that the size of your aircraft makes this the minimum size that you can build. You couldn't just adjust the size down to meet the requirement.
Well, I could adjust it down to barely fit the airplane in there, but I would also like to keep other RV vehicles in there as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And the reason I chose that size was because in the air park HOAs, it says that's the maximum size that's allowed on the air park.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in here.
All right, any other questions for the homeowner or the builder?
I do have one. Something came to mind, sir, when you mentioned that there's a no larger than 2,500 square foot size building in the CC&Rs. Are there other buildings that are 2,500 square feet in there?
There's actually much larger buildings. Yes, there are, but they've been built to commercial standards, from what I understand.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
I bought a lot there, and I was working with Larry, and then we submitted the plans, and then this came up. So I only know one other guy that has a hangar that's much larger than that. I think it's over 3,000 square feet.
Okay, and you said that that was built under the airplane hangar standards?
That's the
for commercial?
scuttlebutt I got from the FBO, the guy that owns the airport. That's what I got from him.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm good.
I have a question for Larry, if you can probably answer this the best. So we're basically talking about the door. Is it a big issue with trying to get the 2-hour fire rating?
Well, yeah, it's a bifold door, and to the best of my knowledge, you'll never get a 2-hour fire rating on a bifold door.
And then what about the wall that faces the neighboring property? There's nothing there to have a problem getting 2 hours, is there?
Yes.
Is there windows in there? Are we too
Yes.
close, or what's going on?
Yes, they need natural light in this structure, and certainly a 2-hour firewall is extremely expensive to comply with, extremely expensive. We would be talking, I would guess, I haven't figured it, in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $40,000 to meet that requirement, and you'd do away with your attic ventilation, you'd do away with your natural light, it'd basically destroy the structure.
So natural light is, you have to have it in this garage?
Pardon?
You'd have to have the natural light in this garage? You couldn't get away with the windows?
Well, I suppose you don't have to have natural light anywhere, but it's sure convenient.
Yeah, okay, well. Okay, that's all I have. Anybody else? Richard?
Mr. Adams, are there other residences on the Antelope Drive that have this type of structure already? Or is this the first?
Absolutely. In one occasion, I built one a few years ago, yes, on the
For
same
an
street.
airplane or for an RV?
Well, they put an airplane in it, but certainly these structures, with the lifestyle today, the airplanes in all cases are just another RV. People got boats, jet skis, ATVs, side-by-sides. But it's
But
not.
there are other buildings on this street that are similar to this proposed project.
Yes, I hadn't analyzed all of them, but virtually every structure down there has an RV garage of some sort. Most of them attached, some of them freestanding, but that's why people buy these lots and go in the airport down there for that purpose.
Thank you.
But yeah, I have built only one, but I have done that, and it's never been a problem till recently when somebody kind of was going through the code and found this provision.
Anybody else? All right, do you have anything else for us, Larry? Or
I don't. I think that pretty well sums it up. We do thank you for the opportunity and the time.
Okay,
And,
thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
I will be here if any other questions come up.
Okay. Okay, Gilbert, it's all yours.
Chairman Walker, board members, we'll start out with just finding of facts. The 2012 International Building Code Chapter 4, Section 412 regulates aircraft-related occupancies. This would include commercial or residential. This section outlines the requirements for aircraft hangars and residential aircraft hangars, determining between the two based on square footage and height. The section limits the height of an area of a residential aircraft hangar to no more than 2,000 square feet in area and 20 feet in building height. Aircraft hangars exceeding the limitations for residential aircraft hangars must meet the provisions for aircraft hangars, Section 412.4. In the IRC, at the beginning of the chapter, basically what the codes have tried to do, they've tried to make a residential code standard and a commercial code standard. And obviously, there's overlapping portions, within the codes. And right in the residential code, the effective use.
Excuse me, they're saying they can't hear again. If you can move your mic up.
They probably just take this off.
Yeah,
help. Basically, in the beginning of the residential code, it reads, the effective use of the International Residential Code states, it is important to understand that the IRC contains coverage for what is conventional and common in residential construction practice. While the IRC will provide all of the needed coverage for most residential construction, it might not address construction practices and systems that are atypical or rarely encountered in the industry. In other words, the IRC is meant to be all-inclusive for typical residential construction, and it relies on other codes only where alternatives are desired or where the code lacks coverage for the uncommon aspect of residential construction. Therefore, when the IRC is silent on the item, particularly an uncommon aspect of residential construction, the other codes must be referenced. And that's where the IBC references aircraft-related occupancies. 2012 Chapter 4 basically has special occupancies, and again, one is residential aircraft occupancies. Section 412 addresses requirements for the use and construction of aircraft hangars. Section 412.5 outlines requirements for residential aircraft hangars, which include fire suppression, or fire separation, egress, smoke alarms, independent utility systems, height and area limits. Section 412.55 regulates the height and area and states residential aircraft hangars shall not be more than 2,000 square feet in area or 20 feet in height. Again, when the structure exceeds those limitations set forth in the residential aircraft hangar portion, then it must be regulated by the aircraft hangar section, IBC section 412.4. 412.4 regulates the hangar as a Group U occupancy, which is a building classification other than a residential structure. It's a utility and miscellaneous type occupancy, and therefore is no longer regulated under the R3 or the residential type occupancy. It would require a 2-hour firewall for mixed occupancies, whether it be next to a residential structure or any other type of occupancies. So on a U structure, and this could even be we've had this situation for large garages over 3,000 square feet, it would require a 2-hour separation when we classify it as a U structure versus an R structure. So we have been addressing this on large garages for 3,000 square foot separation. In conclusion, the 2012 International Building Code is specific regarding the requirements for aircraft hangars. An aircraft hangar over 2,000 square feet in area and over 20 feet in building height must comply with the requirements of aircraft hangars, section 412. There are some things I wanted to address, Mr. Adams. One was the RV garage. If he basically declared it as an RV garage, well, it would be permitted as that. It would require a C of O. The minute you would stick an aircraft into that structure, you would be in violation of the code. So RV garages and accessory structure garages for residential are permitted in the code. Aircraft fuel, basically that is addressed in the fire code. The building code doesn't get into a lot of limitations on the amount of fuel. It does address hazard occupancies that contain a lot of fuel, and I believe it's over 200 gallons of basically regular gasoline, and then it starts requiring firewalls and fire separation requirements. So the fire code really regulates the quantity of any volatile type of acetones, any type of flammable liquids, basically. Larger buildings, he was in fact correct on there are larger buildings on the property, and they basically have had to meet the commercial requirements of 2-hour fire separations less than 30 feet from property line. So we have quite a few out there. I think in the last 6 months we had 2 structures that were built over the 2,000 square foot limit, and they provided 2-hour firewalls. So it can be done. Lights, we do permit solar tube lights, skylights, anything of natural light that can be done from the roof. It's basically the walls that are required to be separated. They do make 2-hour firewall windows, but they're very expensive. So they do make them. I guess the question is, can it be built? Yes, it can. It's just a matter of how the standard of building the structure and what requirements are for that. And that's all I have, Chairman.
Okay, any questions for the building official? Gilbert?
Gilbert, I don't know if I didn't hear it correctly or what it was. The IRC, is there an area limitation for an RV garage attached to a residence?
There is. There's a limitation of 3,000 square feet until you have to provide firewalls, yes, attached or detached.
Right, okay.
Richard, anything?
Gilbert, you had said that in the last 6 months, there was 2 other structures that were built that met these requirements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
With that said, this has been brought up with the doors, the front door and meeting the firewall requirements, the 2-hour firewall with the door. Mr. Adams had said that. On these, do they have the same style door that is going in? How did they meet this requirement? I know that's kind of maybe an off-the-wall question, but the door came into question. That's why I'm asking.
Chairman Walker and Board Member Hamilton, the way of measurement, I mean, obviously one side says from property line, so it says 30 feet from property line. In the code section, it also lets you take into account public right-of-way, and so you usually take half the space of, say, a street, and they're allowed to use that distance for the separation. So in the proposal before us, it has a 20-foot to the property line. Typically, you're going to have a 25-foot street. You'd be allowed to use half of that 25 distance for that setback. So these other structures did maintain the 30 feet and weren't required to have fire doors or fire separation on the fronts of the structures, just on the sides and also between the dwelling and the airplane hangar.
That was a good question. That was mine, too. It was. I got it written down right there. Doug?
Gilbert, really quick question. We transitioned from the 2006 IRC to the 2012 IBC here. What were if you can recall, the 2006 requirements on the residential hangar and then the aircraft hangar that gets pushed over that 2,000 square foot into commercial? Is it similar? Did the size increase, decrease?
Board Member McKee, actually, no. The 2003 code had it in there exactly the same, the 2006 code, and it has not changed in the 2018 code. That was some of our concerns of has there been proposals to increase this size, and there has not been.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, are you with us still? You have any questions?
Yes, Dan is. I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was my question, was on the doors. I was going to ask how the other properties were able to do that, and that's good to know about the right-of-way, and I think that kind of clears up Larry. Larry, you want to come on up?
Chairman Walker, if I might just summarize real quick with Gilbert. The purpose of the appeal is basically to review the interpretation of the code and to see was the chief building official's interpretation of the code accurate in the way that he reviewed the information. Whether the code is correct or whether it's, should be that way, whether we should look at a different size and all of that, we've actually got a follow-up item on that on the agenda. But for this one, the intent of this is to look at the interpretation of the building official on the code. And really, it's pretty clear in the code. Section 412 gives you aircraft hangars, and Section 412.4 is basically an exemption per se of a residential hangar. So Section 412 is the requirements for an aircraft hangar. However, if you build that aircraft hangar under 2,000 square feet or less than 20 feet in height, then you have a smaller requirement. And basically that's pretty much where we're at with this. So the requirements of the code are this, unless you're less than 2,000 square foot. If you're less than 2,000, then you qualify residential. So I just wanted to in summary of Gilbert's presentation, just kind of point that out for you as well.
Okay,
so thank you.
May I ask a question, Mr. Roll? Tim, quick question, if I may. And I know that we're here to interpret, but this is a matter of curiosity that might come in handy. Do you happen to know the reason of the separation between the 2,000 and 2,500 square feet, or what's the 2,000 square foot rule? Why is it there? I mean, I know that generally codes have a reason for limitations. Are you aware of the reason why?
And it's a great question, Board Member McKee. And actually, I believe in item number 2, Gilbert goes through a lot of the research that he's done in trying to identify the reasoning for that. But ultimately, I believe it has to do, and Gilbert, you correct me if I'm wrong, ultimately I believe it has to do with the fuel storage that's associated with airplanes, and really the the size of the garage, you'll see, as was mentioned previously, a 3,000 square foot RV garage. Once you hit that limit, then you're starting to look at your 2-hour firewalls. When it comes to airplanes, I believe the code officials or the ICC felt that because it related to aircrafts, that warranted a smaller size. Other than that, I don't know the exact specifics on why, but that's kind of the logic that I've understood with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of thought it was because you can put a bigger plane in there that has more fuel or a little jet. You know, I don't know what kind of fuel it would run, but just the size of the plane, you're going to have more fuel is what I was thinking. So, okay, good. Larry?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. We did ask that this be reviewed under the 2006 building code. Gilbert cited the 2012. That specific verbiage, I don't know is if it's identical to 2006. The meat of the codes, it didn't change between 2006 and 2012. What he was citing, I don't know whether it was different in 2006, but were reviewed under 2006. I would disagree with his interpretation. The code is pretty clear. It says 30 feet from a public right-of-way. That's the property line. In the middle of the street, that's an arbitrary interpretation as far as I'm concerned. But there's no reason to have this requirement there. And if I'd known it'd been a problem, all we had to do was put RV garage. There was nothing to prohibit putting an airplane in an RV garage. That's the technicality. And my client shouldn't be penalized for $30,000 or $40,000 over a nitpicking technicality. Thank you.
Richard, anything to add? Any discussion or? No?
Kind of.
Well, let's hear it.
Well, I guess, if I understand correctly from Mr. Walsh, this is for us to see if this is interpreted correctly. That's the decision that we're supposed to make. Is that correct?
And I'll yield to the attorney, but yes, that's.
Yes, your position here is not to determine whether or not that requirement should be part of the building code. It's whether or not the building official has read and applied the requirement correctly. There's some other items on the agenda where you can consider things like, should we even have this requirement, things like that. But right now it's just to interpret what is there.
Okay. Rex, you have any discussion or?
Well, I'm still just struggling, again, as Larry was saying, I'm just not really seeing the difference between a giant RV, a giant boat with special fuel, or an aircraft. So to me, I'm having problems bumping this into the IBC just because of the fact that it's a small aircraft and not a large RV or boat. So I am having problems with that interpretation. That given, the code, is pretty clear.
Yeah. Oh. Doug?
Just a point of discussion. I'm a limited government guy, non-regulations kind of guy. I've just always been, but and Larry, I love the difference between, like, what's the difference between a flying RV and a road RV, and I understand that concept, I really do. And this doesn't have part to do with any decision I'll be making, but I'd like to address that because the RVs and quads and side-by-sides, none of those are regulated by a different agency. An aircraft is regulated by the FAA, as you know. I believe you're a pilot, aren't you? No, I thought you were a pilot but they fall under a whole host of different regulations of how you transport them, how they're treated, inspections that need to be made, logs that need to be kept. So there's a huge difference between what I consider a recreational vehicle and an airplane. So, I mean, that's the first thing that kind of came to mind on that. I know we're not here to determine that, but perhaps, that just food for thought on what Rex was talking about is not seeing the difference between the two. I mean, I see a difference between the two. It's not have a rendering on any decision that's being made, but I mean, I don't see an airplane as an RV. I see it as a regulated vehicle under a completely different association, the FAA. So.
Appreciate it. Chairman Walker, if I might just speak to that item of if we call this an RV garage, again, this would be a separate item, a separate discussion outside of the interpretation, whether the interpretation was correct or not. But I would caution Mr. Adams and his client on labeling this an RV garage. That permit would call this an RV garage, and basically once you place an airplane inside that RV garage, it now is an aircraft hangar, and it would be, as the chief building official mentioned, it would be in violation. Now, would we catch them? Would we police that? Would we go after it? Not likely, unless we received a complaint that was occurring. Then we'd have to look into it. The real concern and caution that I would give Mr. Adams and his client is, if they ever attempt to sell an RV garage that doesn't allow an aircraft inside of an aircraft park, that might cause some trouble for trying to resell that in the future, because the permit will show an RV garage with no aircraft being allowed in it.
Okay. Dan, you have anything to add or questions?
I don't. Good arguments. I think it's, and again, I really appreciate Larry's argument, and it makes a lot of sense. And it is difficult, but I don't have any questions at this point. Thanks.
Okay. I personally, I fall under the deal where, I know there's these high horsepower boats out there with twin engines, 300 gallons of fuel, and they're 5 foot from the property line. I think Gilbert did read the facts given to him and played it against the code right. And I know that's what we're here to discuss. I mean, I don't know if I agree with the right-of-way in the front of the house. I mean, I'm glad there's some flexible room there. And I think there's a way to work around this and where it's not $40,000 for the owner, changing those windows. I mean, lose the windows for $40,000 is what I would do. But, as soon as you went over that 2,000 foot threshold, this kicked it into a new category. And I think Gilbert has called it the way, to protect his job in the county. I think he's done what he's had to do. Is there some give and take that could happen and make this project happen? I think there is, but I think Gilbert called it the way it is. So I don't know if anyone has any more discussion or if we want to.
I just, in light of what the chairman is saying, I mean, like I said, we're here to interpret, and to me, it very clearly says that anything up to 2,000 square feet, or above the 2,000 square feet, falls under the commercial code. I mean, it does say that. I think the code was interpreted correctly. At this time, not to say that we as a board might in the future have some wiggle room on that to maybe make the options better in the future, but I believe at this present time, the code was interpreted correctly. I don't see, I've looked up and down this for the past week or two, tried to see different things. I also did look at the 2006 IRC. It is the same. It's identical verbiage. And I don't see any way around this, and I'm always looking for angles and around things, and I think the code was interpreted correctly in this situation here. And again, Mr. Chair, like I said, for discussion at a later time, I believe we could probably play with the numbers and work with the building department on it. They've been really good about working with us as a board.
Yeah, they have.
That's my personal opinion.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, anybody want to make a motion?
Let me jump in. Just again, I'm going to kind of go to the same thing here as this is with regards to RV garages or just 3,000 square foot garages or less. And there are numerous properties that I've seen that will have an RV, a motorhome that has 120 gallon fuel tank in it. You'll have a 40-foot boat that's going to have a large fuel capacity. Again, both of those are probably more fuel capacity than in the airplane, and all the other things that go with it. So in one regard, from a safety standpoint, I scratch my head, and it's too bad we have the rule. We have to, that the code is there, but it is. But again, for future reference, I think that we need to probably take a look at a little bit of flexibility on situations like this.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Anyone want to make a, oh, come on up.
I'd just like to add that boats and most motorhomes are made out of fiberglass, whereas the airplane is made out of aluminum. So as far as the burning goes, I think the fiberglass would burn quicker than aluminum.
No, I agree with you. Thank you.
We ready for motions?
I'd like somebody to make a motion.
I make a motion that the building code in this situation has been interpreted correctly, and the reading should stand.
Second.
Okay, we have a first, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And for the record, I'm going to abstain because of a possible conflict of interest. This is Dan.
Okay. Next item, I think we're going to possibly discuss postponing.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion on that, if I may.
Yes, sir.
These are some things that are pretty important to us as builders and in the building department. There's quite a host of information to go over. I would like to make a motion to table this for 3 weeks and then pick it up. It will give us an opportunity to kind of read it and go over it. We didn't have a lot of time to process this information, so I make a motion to table that for 3 weeks and then reconvene with that in concern.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh,
Aye.
Chairman, just to be clear, I want to make sure that, understand that, was that for items 2 through 9?
correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for the record
Yes,
as well.
sorry about that.
Oh, so we want to, those are continued, correct?
Yes,
For 3 weeks, so
whenever you can get us scheduled again,
if
at
we
least
can-
3 weeks.
3 weeks? Well,
Whatever works in your guys' calendar and
Karen,
by us once you figure out a
if I
couple
can-
dates are open.
If I can bug you, 3 weeks from today, is this room available? If you have, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't have that information with me. I would have to check to see
Okay.
what, yeah.
So we'll plan on 3 weeks from today, 1:30 here. That doesn't work for Board Member Hamilton. If we could come up with a date, that would be ideal, and then that way we can table it, or continue is the word I'm looking for. We could continue it to that date. From a open meeting law and advertising and all of that, those requirements, if we can continue it to a time and date specific, that would help us as far as advertising requirements.
3 weeks from today looks like September 2nd on my calendar. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's a tough week for me.
Okay.
That's right before the Labor Day weekend.
There was some discussion of possibly 2 weeks from today. Does that work for everybody?
Doug?
I can make that work.
2 weeks. Yeah, I can make that work.
Okay.
And Mehdi's not here, so he doesn't get a choice.
So he will be here.
Yeah.
So we'll
Yes.
so
Is that okay?
So those items will be then continued to the 26th at 1:30 here, and if there's any conflict with the room, we'll reach out to the board and let you know.
Thank you. Any announcements, or were you there? Any reports, announcements?
I think,
I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
Make motion to adjourn?
Got a second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting's closed.
thank you.